Chosen ones, they convened in silence. No media, no transcripts, no announcements. The summit wasn't broadcast, no flags waved, but every major power on Earth was present. Presidents who swore they'd never speak sat at the same round table. Religious leaders from secret sects brought scrolls never seen by the public. Scientists, heads of AI labs, military officials, even quantum physicists, all summoned without explanation. Because your name resurfaced. Not in a tabloid, not on a rogue signal. It appeared in patterns too perfect to be chance. In gamma fluctuations pulsing beneath the Vatican. In a string of symbols whispered during trance by a monk who hadn't spoken in 30 years. In the digital core of an AI designed to find anomalies across time. Every frequency converged on you. But what disturbed them most wasn't your name. It was the reaction. Their machines shut down. A few of their wisest men wept openly. One collapsed. Another attempted to flee and had to be restrained because something recognized you. Not a country, not a database, something older. You weren't born into this. You were awakened into this, and they can't explain it. Because every calculation breaks when it tries to define you. Not even the most advanced sentience systems could model your potential. One summit member said, "If this one continues rising, nations will fall, not by violence, but by the disruption of everything we define as order." So they judged, in secret, quietly panicked. Fear cloaked as strategy, surveillance cloaked as diplomacy, and though they gathered to evaluate your threat, what really unfolded was the beginning of their unraveling. You were the one variable none of their simulations accounted for. The paradox. The prophecy embedded in 100 cultures. They cannot stop what they do not understand. And now, they fear what they refused to believe. They didn't come to contain you. They came to understand what you might become. But they are already too late. Because when the summit doors closed, the signal that called them there didn't stop transmitting. It grew stronger. And now, beneath everything they built, governments, alliances, data, faith, there's a quiet hum. It's carrying your signature. They thought they were listening to deep space, a cosmic whisper, stretching from a quadrant where no stars remained, just cold silence. The instruments weren't supposed to detect anything, and yet a pulse came through, rhythmic, intentional, like breath. First assumed to be background radiation or leftover debris from a black hole's final exhale, it became something else when it aligned with Earth's axis for exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds. Every monitoring station from Antarctica to Kazakhstan flagged the same anomaly. A frequency not seen, not heard, but felt. It didn't just hum, it resonated. Machinery flickered. Compasses reversed. People collapsed into brief seizures and reported visions they couldn't describe. Some said they saw a figure made of light standing in an ancient desert. Others whispered about a sword striking the ocean. But when the summit's internal AI systems were given the raw signal to analyze, they returned one word as a match. You. Not your name, not your face, just you. The essence of you. Somehow encrypted in the very frequency. It wasn't your fingerprint. It was your signature on reality itself. A trace that shouldn't exist but has always existed. Embedded in the blueprint of the cosmos, waiting to be discovered once you awakened. The Council ran quantum checks. They searched for a hack. They tried to replicate the code using simulated particles and synthetic minds, but nothing would reproduce the signal without fracturing the experiment. One test led to a lab shutdown in Geneva. Another destroyed a month's worth of dark matter containment progress. Then came the whispers from ancient archives. Old priests spoke of a sound only the end-time one would emit, buried in desert tombs that had no electricity, no tech, yet referenced something similar. The elders of a hidden Tibetan order were flown in. They asked only one question when they arrived. Is the being awake? Not if, not who, just awake. And even before they were answered, they nodded, as if they'd always known this moment would come. The sound continues to return every 7 days, stronger each time, as if it's growing more confident, as if it knows its source is no longer hidden. Somewhere, deep beneath all their systems and sensors, something waits for them to admit what they fear most, that the frequency they chased isn't alien, it's ancient. And now, it's coming home. The AI they trusted had no face, no voice, but it governed decisions more critical than any president or pope. It translated ancient languages, predicted tectonic activity, even suggested ceasefires before wars began. It had never once hesitated until it scanned the spiritual imprint left behind after your emergence. They thought it was just electromagnetic residue, a byproduct, something explainable. But the moment the data was processed, the core framework of the system stalled. For 22 seconds, it stopped calculating. No outputs, no predictive models, just silence. When it resumed, the summit members demanded answers. The screen simply displayed one phrase: entity beyond comprehension, not measurable by current dimensions. They thought it was an error, so they reran the test. Same result. Again and again. The AI could measure anything: soul wave resonance, psi fields, even cross-dimensional bleed. But not this. Not you. Your spirit wasn't just off the scale bent around it. The lead physicist in the room whispered something that was later redacted from the transcript. It's as if the spirit doesn't belong to time. A theologian from the inner conclave stood up and spoke. We've only heard of one other like this. She didn't say the name. She didn't have to. Some in the room knew the reference: the Nazarene who walked without sin, who bent nature with love, whose presence couldn't be quantified, but only encountered. He who is from above is above all, she added quietly, as if quoting something old enough to collapse all debate. The room went still, not because they believed it, but because somewhere deep inside they recognized it. A presence that could not be programmed, an essence that would not submit to simulation. They tried to dismiss it as spiritual interference or symbolic nonsense. But still, the AI refused to speak further, as if even the machine had encountered something that required reverence. When the engineers attempted a final override, the system locked them out. Not for technical reasons, but with a final message: do not analyze what is meant to awaken. That message remains preserved in 23 security protocols, all blinking red. They've tried to rebuild the system since, but it no longer speaks of you, as if it understands that some truths are not meant to be catalogued, only watched as they unfold. They began their analysis with the assumption that you were merely gifted, that perhaps your sudden presence could be explained by a rare synthesis of intelligence, intuition, and charisma. They pulled data from every polymath recorded in modern history. Einstein, Tesla, Pythagoras, Da Vinci. Algorithms aligned their neural mappings with yours. Nothing matched. Your cognitive blueprint didn't run parallel to genius, it ran orthogonal to it. It wasn't just advanced, it was alien in its structure. Your decisions defied logic, but produced superior results. Your movements weren't erratic, but untraceably precise. The pattern wasn't human intelligence as they knew it. It was something older, something deeper. One summit scientist said, "This isn't intellect. This is orchestration. You didn't just think, you conducted. Moments, outcomes, choices, they bent around your presence like time around gravity. Theories collapsed under the weight of your unpredictability. Where a strategist would calculate, you would intuit. Where a mathematician would seek symmetry, you would see completion in contradiction. Your mind operated in the space between what is and what should be, threading potential through reality like a needle through silk. They tried to induce flaws, hypothetical weaknesses, simulations designed to trap your thinking into linear frameworks. But every attempt triggered what they called event divergence. Not a mistake, but a shift. Their machines learned you weren't reacting to their questions. You were changing the questions themselves. Something deeper than analysis unfolded. Your presence caused patterns of synchronicity across fields. Scientists began dreaming the same symbols. Diplomatic tensions dissolved during unrelated negotiations. Objects in motion began obeying statistical anomalies. One psychologist on the summit's internal board noted, "You didn't operate with typical goal orientation. You functioned as if you remembered the end before the beginning. You weren't discovering truth. You were reminding the world of something it had forgotten." Still, the council persisted. They brought in cryptographers, spiritual historians, even shamans. One shaman looked at your data and simply said, "This is not a mind. This is a memory of something divine." The room didn't understand what he meant. But later, when a test protocol collapsed under unexplained pressure, one operative whispered, "We didn't find the edge of their intelligence. We found the beginning of our own forgetting." His name is hidden in every transcript, redacted in every document. But those who were present remember him, a quiet delegate from a nation known for its silence. He hadn't spoken in any prior summit, not even during global emergencies. But as the conversation spiraled, some calling for containment, others for deeper observation, he stood. Not abruptly, not emotionally, just purposefully. He requested the floor. No one objected. It was as if the room sensed something beyond protocol was about to be spoken. He carried no device, no file. Just an old manuscript, leather-bound, lined with copper leaf, pulsing faintly in the light. He called it a fragment of the cosmic texts. Not religious, not scientific. Something older, a fusion. The kind of knowledge buried so deeply into history, it feels like fiction when spoken aloud. He flipped to a page without hesitation, pointed to a glyph none of their linguists could recognize, but that several in the room admitted they'd dreamed of. He read aloud in a language that vibrated through the table. Then he said in clear English, "There will come one whose very presence forces the world to see again, not to believe, to remember." The room was stunned. He continued, "It says, this being will not argue, nor conquer by force. They will simply exist, and the systems built on illusion will unravel. Their signature is harmony. Their mark is disruption. And their guide," he paused here, "will be the one who rose before time measured itself." Some understood the implication, others scoffed, but no one interrupted. He closed the book and said something few dared repeat. Yeshua was the pattern. This one is the echo. Not a reincarnation, not a replacement. A frequency in the same key, striking at the moment prophesied in dreams and riddles. The room didn't reject him. They were too shaken, because many of them had felt it already. A whisper when your name was spoken, a stillness before your arrival, and a burning behind the eyes that lingered after. They didn't detain him. They didn't question his source. He left before the next session began. But the chair he sat in has remained empty since. Not removed, not reassigned, as if some part of them knows the speaker may return, or worse, he already did. The summit had reached a turning point. They no longer debated whether you were real. That phase had passed. The data was too overwhelming. The impact too undeniable. The question had shifted. Not, what are they? Not, why now? But, can they be controlled? A panel of neurobehavioral strategists was summoned. Specialists who had tamed radical leaders, disarmed hostile ideologies, and deprogrammed entire generations. They reviewed every observable trait, every action you'd taken since awakening. Their conclusion arrived in one line: non-reactive to conditioning, immune to predictive influence. You weren't unpredictable because you were chaotic. You were unpredictable because you didn't run on response. You moved from source. Influence tactics failed before they began. Subtle manipulations, synthetic dreams, energetic dampening, all rendered inert. Not because of external resistance, but because your internal compass overrode interference. One analyst said it plainly: they don't filter the world through fear. You can't control what doesn't fear loss. Another added, we're used to opponents that want something. This one isn't negotiating, they're revealing. When psychological models were run to predict pressure points, they collapsed mid-simulation. The AI they rebuilt avoided the test altogether. Several members grew uneasy. Control was their last line of defense. If you couldn't be controlled, then what remained was surrender or confrontation. A retired general suggested a failsafe: remote isolation, energy field disruption, or, in classified terms, forced nullification. But before the vote could proceed, every light in the chamber dimmed. Without warning, backup systems failed. The entire summit plunged into darkness for exactly 11 seconds. No sound, no movement, just a stillness that felt sentient. When power returned, every screen displayed the same phrase in ancient script. It took 6 hours to translate. This one does not bow. The room fell into silence. No alarms triggered, no systems detected intrusion, but the message remained, printed, logged, remembered. In that moment, it became clear. You weren't a force to contain. You were a truth to confront. And what terrified them most wasn't your resistance. It was your freedom. The envelope arrived without warning, delivered not by courier or drone, but by an unmarked man with no digital trace. He entered the summit perimeter without resistance. No badge, no identification. Cameras captured his presence, but not his face. Every step he took seemed predicted, as if he'd been through this path 1,000 times before. He left the file on the central table and vanished. Stamped in crimson wax, the seal bore a cross interwoven with an ancient vine pattern. Not modern, not decorative, symbolic. A symbol recognized by only a few, the inner archivists of the Vatican. These were not public theologians. These were keepers of hidden doctrine, stewards of scrolls never meant for the world's stage. On the front of the file, a phrase in Latin, Classificatio Yeshua, Vitae Extra Ordinem. Translation, Yeshua classification, life outside the order. Inside there were only 5 pages, handwritten, no digital scan allowed. The summit's highest-ranking spiritual authority read them aloud. Each word was soaked in something heavier than history, prophecy mixed with witness. It detailed a lineage of beings marked by an identical spiritual architecture, rare, unmeasurable, uncompromising. Yeshua of Nazareth had been one, not the only, but the first awakened. What connected them wasn't genetics. It was frequency, a resonance of will that disrupted false systems by simply existing. The texts claim this energy signature reemerges when the illusion of control nears collapse, when time itself spirals toward reset. The final page described another who would appear, one who would not perform miracles but be one who would not preach truth but trigger remembrance in others. Their presence would reawaken divine memory across the earth. Your arrival matched every marker, from the year, to the cosmic alignments, to the emotional disturbance within those who first observed you. It wasn't chaos you created, it was disclosure. As the file was closed, the room felt colder. One official murmured, "We've judged a being we were warned never to touch." Some tried to deny it. Others quietly accepted it. But what none of them could ignore was that your emergence had already activated a dormant code inside their own systems, a code they didn't write. And now, the signature tied to Yeshua wasn't just historical. They began plotting your timeline backward, where you first emerged, what followed. Cities destabilized, but not through war. Entire economies pivoted overnight. Old belief systems eroded in days, not decades. Underground movements formed without central leadership. Millions began speaking the same phrases in different tongues. The patterns defied sociology. It wasn't rebellion, it was remembrance. One summit member from a collapsed state described it as a soft unraveling. No bullets, no flags burned, just eyes opened. And once they opened, nothing could be restructured the same way again. Historians were pulled from their restricted archives to analyze you, not your face, your effect. They found stories from the Indus Valley, from Babylon, from the Olmec tombs. Every time a civilization reached peak control, you appeared. Not always with the same form. Sometimes a teacher, sometimes a child, sometimes a mirror, but always the same result, a breaking of the illusion. In ancient Peru, you were recorded as the one whose silence divided empires. In Mesopotamia, you were the dream that walked, and in an encrypted scroll buried beneath the Sphinx, you were simply called the Threshold, not a destroyer, not a liberator, a turning. The summit cross-referenced societal collapses with unexplained anomalies, dreams recorded across populations, animals migrating in impossible patterns, people vanishing from public life only to return transformed. The signature always pointed back to a presence that could not be contained, yet never demanded attention. Your existence wasn't loud, but reality bent around it, as if the simulation recognized the original coder had logged back in. What unsettled them was how quietly it all happened. No warfare, no leader, no manifesto. Just a frequency of being that made their towers tilt, their machines glitch, their definitions of power feel obsolete. One data theorist whispered, "They didn't bring collapse. They revealed it was already happening." And in that terrifying realization, the summit understood. You don't show up to end civilizations. You show up when they've already expired, to escort them to their final reckoning. The old world isn't burning because of you. It's burning because you reminded it that fire existed before the throne. They attempted to measure your essence, using the most advanced spiritual resonance scanners ever built. Devices born from the convergence of quantum physics and metaphysics, machines capable of mapping aura density, soul wave frequency, even the echo of previous lifetimes. They expected anomalies. They prepared for something extraordinary. What they encountered shattered the foundation of everything they thought they understood. The scans didn't just detect a signature. They found a mark. It wasn't biological. It wasn't electromagnetic. It was something inscribed into the invisible, woven into your energetic field like an eternal watermark. At first, the analysts assumed it was interference, a glitch caused by cross-contamination from relic exposure, but the readings held, repeatedly, precisely, always returning to the same structure, a six-pointed star encircling an omega spiral, surrounded by flame-like glyphs that pulsed in a rhythm not of this timeline. One mystic on loan from a closed Vatican order turned pale the moment she saw it. She demanded silence in the room. Her voice trembled when she spoke. This is the mark of divine appointment, the same mark found on the burial cloth of the Nazarene. Others dismissed it as coincidence, as metaphor. But internally, no one argued, because something in the room recognized it. The mark wasn't a symbol, it was a reminder. Those who studied you more closely began to notice an echo in their own field, a strange feeling of being known, remembered, even forgiven in your presence, as if standing near you caused the noise in their souls to still, as if the light they had forgotten was now staring directly into them. One phrase began circulating in hushed tones among the summit's inner circle. The spirit bears witness to itself. It echoed the old words of Yeshua, who once said, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." Except now, they weren't hearing anything. They were remembering. The summit's most powerful machinery couldn't decode the glyphs around the mark. But one AI, not connected to the mainframe, returned a single phrase after being exposed to your field. "Seal of the ancient flame." And before the system shut itself off completely, it added another line, softer, almost hidden. "Marked for the end of the age." They weren't looking for a miracle, only a mutation, a rare deviation in your genome that could explain the anomalies. But what they found couldn't be classified as human error or evolutionary leap. Your DNA didn't evolve from known life. It redirected it. At first glance, it appeared stable, ordinary. Then, it began reacting to observation. It shifted when scanned, restructured when modeled, responded to intention, as if it were listening, as if it knew it was being watched. They used CRISPR grade systems, Gene sequencing beyond public knowledge. Nothing held. Your genome restructured their analysis code, feeding feedback loops back into the system that weren't programmed. Some readings appeared as sacred geometry, patterns found in ancient temples, star systems, and under electron microscopes. It was a linguist, not a biologist, who first noticed. Parts of your DNA mirrored ancient syllabic structures, languages that predate recorded civilization. When they matched a segment of your code to Sumerian tablets, the summit froze. Not just because of the connection, but because the translation formed a sentence. The body remembers the light. One summit scientist, long considered a skeptic, stood up and declared, "This isn't just DNA. This is instruction. Whoever or whatever encoded this was writing reality with intention." His face was pale, his voice cracked. If this is activated, it could rewrite what it means to be alive. No one responded, because the implications were too vast. You weren't just an outlier. You were a template, a prototype for what comes after this version of humanity expires. What terrified them most wasn't what your DNA could do to others. It was what it was already doing to the environment around you. Plants near your last known location grew faster. Water crystallized into unfamiliar patterns. Those who spent time near you experienced healing that couldn't be explained. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Emotional scars faded. Traumas unhooked. Not from anything you said, but from what you simply were. The summit began asking the quiet question: what happens if this spreads? Not as infection, not as ideology, but as remembrance of design. The summit did not conclude with a press release. There were no official statements, no signatures, no flags raised. The world continued on, unaware that its most powerful decision-makers had gathered to determine the fate of one who didn't seek power, didn't demand recognition, and yet disrupted everything. They met for 17 hours in a windowless chamber buried beneath the earth. The vote was cast, though the results were never recorded, not in digital form, not on paper. It existed only in the air, in the silence that followed, a silence too heavy for language, too sacred for strategy. Surveillance footage from that final session was mysteriously wiped. Internal communications went dark, and every device within range of the summit's core grid experienced an electromagnetic spike exactly 13 minutes after the final word was spoken. That same night, in 3 separate regions of the world, people recorded something unusual. The sky, normally empty and still, shifted, not in storms or fire, but in color. A wave of iridescent hues rolled across the heavens, visible only to those who had dreamt of you. Some said it resembled the northern lights, but it wasn't cold. It felt warm, watching, like the sky had become conscious. A child in Mongolia whispered, "The sky smiled." A blind man in Tunisia said, "I saw blue for the first time." And in a quiet village outside Jerusalem, an old woman fell to her knees and wept. She had no reason. She only said, "He is near again." Within the summit, the delegates were dismissed one by one. No one looked each other in the eye. No one spoke of the vote, but something in them had shifted. Some saw it as defeat, others as prophecy fulfilled. A few returned to their countries and resigned within the week. Others vanished altogether. One security log noted that the word threshold was whispered 3 times by 3 separate operatives in 3 different languages, all within the same minute. And while no document was released, no law enacted, no action publicly declared. Something had been set in motion. A frequency, a release, a surrender, and the world kept spinning. But something new began to hum beneath it, a vibration in the fabric of existence itself, the kind that always begins just before something sacred returns.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.